Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Hard Truth Distilling Company in Brown County, Indiana.
So for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, it's time!
3 on the way. Oh! It went in! It went in! And Indiana wins the ball game!
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Float game for the win! Ayla's gone. Goodbye. Touchdown, Indy. Woo! IU. America. They got a football team now.
Pretty simple. I win. Google me.
You know that I'm the cream of the crop.
Now, from the Hard Truth Studios, here's Jim Coyle.
Good day and welcome to another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle. Sitting in for Jim is myself, Coach Griff. And we've got a loaded show for you today. We'll dive into the debate over preseason polls with Hall of Fame writer Mike DeCourcy. Break down Shador Sanders' first unexpected start with the Browns against the Panthers. And then get the latest from the Hoosier fall football camp that's going on. And then Mitt Winter from a sports attorney will join us to discuss the Lewis Moore situation, get his insights on all of that. So we're talking polls, preseason, and plenty of pigskin here today on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. And appreciate you joining us today. Jim will be joining at some time. He is in the air as we speak, heading back to Indianapolis. Had a red eye from San Juan at 2:30 this morning and is hoping to join us at about 9:40-ish this morning. So once he gets back into Indianapolis, I'm sure he'll find a nice quiet area and he will bless us with his presence all the way back from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And how about the Hoosiers basketball team? They go into Puerto Rico, first time getting on the hardwood, and they do a complete 3-game sweep of their opponents. 2 of those games, of course, against the Serbian Mega Superbet team, a team known for producing NBA talent. And once again, they got down against them, Superbet, and Indiana came clawing back once again and basically stole their last game 81-80. Pretty thrilling contest following along via Twitter, or what we know as X now. And then, of course, all the different write-ups that were on the Hoosier.com with great coverage of all the games there in Puerto Rico. And some really, really good performances turned in. Lamar Wilkerson, 17 points yesterday. He ended up averaging 15.7 points for the entire 3 games there. And Tucker DeVries had averaged around 10 points a game. He was 80% from the free throw line, which is a great number there. One area that I think Indiana will improve is at the foul line, which they weren't very good at last year. Connerway had averaged 13 points. Bailey, 7.7 points. Trent Sicily, the freshman phenom, 60% from the 3-point range, 11.3 points a game, three rebounds average, and 1.7 assists. So very good work for the young freshman there, showing he made a pretty good step up into the competitive ranks of college basketball, especially these last 2 ball games. Now, he didn't have as many points in game 2 of that matchup against the Serbian Mega Super Bet, where he had 10 points in the game number 2. And yesterday, he averaged only 3 points. But again, a pretty good trip for the young man, because he came out of the gates firing, had 21 points in the first game there off the bus, so to speak, and did a great job. So, yes, Jamie, I do believe we do have confirmation of Jim boarding. Well, I guess our guess is good as anything. I did speak to him last night about that late flight and who was his booking agent, scheduling a 2:30 in the morning flight. But yeah, he is ready to roll, as he said, to get back home again in Indiana. So it's he'll like I said, hopefully join us there from the Indianapolis airport on site there around the 9:40. I think his flight gets in about 9. So hopefully he'll get up and get set up there. Like I said, we're going to talk to Mike DeCourcy. You know, the preseason poll debate is always a big bone of contention for a lot of people. And there has been some coaches that have come out and said to get rid of it. You know, I think the AP poll in general, and this is what we'll talk with Mike about, is I feel that poll is more about brand awareness than anything. And with Indiana in the AP poll coming in at number 20, there's a big discrepancy between 11 and 20, because you got Illinois at 11 and Indiana at 20. And in between there are teams that you shake your head at and not understand why they are ahead of Indiana. But we're going to get the one and only Mike DeCourcy's take on that, and see what his feelings are about the AP poll. Sports Illustrated comes out with a poll, has Indiana at number 10. You know, it's crazy. Now, the coaches poll had Indiana at 19, and the AP had them at 20. So there's a little bit of continuity between two polls. But you get the Sports Illustrated one, and they got Indiana at number 10. So we'll get his take on that, as well as his thoughts on Shador Sanders. Everything from his NFL day draft debacle, you could say, to the fact that he ends up starting the first preseason game against Carolina because all the other quarterbacks were injured. So he gets the start against Carolina and does actually pretty good. 14 of 23, 138 yards, 2 TDs, no interceptions. QBR rating of a 106.8. Yeah, Flacco and I think Pickett and Gabriel were all injured and did not play. So he played the entire game in that win there in Carolina. So we'll get his take on that. Has Shador Sanders all of a sudden risen from the ashes and became a potential starter now for the Browns, or at least the number 2 guy? We'll get his take on all that as well here in a moment. And then Mike Nizolek will be in down from the Herald-Times there in Bloomington. Talk about the Hoosiers scrimmage that they had Saturday, and some of Coach Sig's press conference yesterday, media availability yesterday, and sounds like they had some bumps and bruises and some guys not in the scrimmage on Saturday. Don't think it's anything serious with some of those guys, but a take on where Sig feels that they're at this point in camp, and some early battles that are occurring for depth chart positioning. So we'll get his take on all that. And then Mitt Winter, sports attorney. I think he played basketball there at William and Mary back in the day. This Lewis Moore situation that now finds him potentially not eligible by not being granted another year of eligibility by the NCAA. Everybody was assuming that with the Pavia decision there in Vanderbilt by a federal judge that granted his injunction against the NCAA, that was kind of a blanket deal. And the NCAA didn't see it that way. So we'll get Mitt Winter's take on that. He's a former NCAA attorney as well, so he'll have some great insights in that situation. And I think Lewis Moore is an important part of the Hoosier secondary. If they would happen to lose him, while it may not be the end of the world per se, it's still a guy that you're losing that has valuable experience playing the position. And all of a sudden, now you're putting in somebody that you weren't anticipating playing a ton of snaps, but I do think Indiana has the pieces to step it in there in the secondary, because there's plenty of guys there that are capable to step into Lewis's position. But we'll get Mr. Winter's take on that situation from an expert, and I believe at that point Jim probably will be back too and get his insight as well. Plus, he'll give us a full report from San Juan, Puerto Rico, and this 3-game set that the Hoosiers swept there. And that game yesterday, when I talked to Jim, he said was so impressive to be in the gym and watching it. Indiana was down for the most part that whole game, in some cases by 10. And he said they sat in there and battled, chipped away, and found themselves on the front end with seconds left in that game, and were able to hold on and capture the 81-80 victory. So you got to feel pretty good where Indiana basketball is at coming out of that 3-game stretch. Now, does that make them, a different breed heading into the Big Ten season? Not necessarily, but it gives them a great idea of the identity this team will have heading into the latter months here in August through September, and when they get truly rolling in October with all that. We're going to step aside here, take a first break of the day, and hopefully when we get back, we'll have Mike DeCourcy on to talk a little bit of the preseason polls, all right here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
Andy Moore Honda is Bloomington's #1 Honda dealer for a reason. Buy a new Honda and get a 3-month break from car payments. That's right, no payments for 90 days. That includes the all-new, all-electric Honda Prologue, and you get it for just 0.9% financing. Or the 2024 Honda Ridgeline Black Edition or the Honda Accord LX, both for just 1.9% financing. Get more to your door from AndyMooreHonda.com, Bloomington's #1 Honda dealer and your best place for new and used vehicles. If you're looking for a new home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore from Brick and Ivy Realty. Cheryl Sizemore has over 2 decades of experience, and that could be the difference in getting the home you want in today's tough housing market. Reach out to Cheryl at CherylSizemooreSells@gmail.com or 317-701-0838. That's 317-701-0838. Let Cheryl Sizemore sell or find your new home today. Located on 325 acres in beautiful Brown County, Indiana, Hard Truth Distilling Company is the biggest and the best craft distillery around. While Hard Truth is already known for producing internationally awarded whiskeys and spirits like Hard Truth's sour mash bourbons, sweet mash, and hard road ryes, as well as their cinnamon vodka and the always popular toasted coconut rum. Hard Truth Distillery offers so much more. With a full-service restaurant, ATV, and distillery tours, as well as live music, you can spend an entire day at Hard Truth Distillery while making your entire family or group happy. And that's the Hard Truth. Hard Truth products are available across Indiana, as well as many other states. So no matter where you shop, if they don't carry your favorite Hard Truth product, tell them you want the truth, the Hard Truth. Hard Truth Distilling Company encourages you to enjoy all of their products responsibly and to never drink and drive.
Welcome back here to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, Tuesday edition. I'm the Coach Shannon Griffith, sitting in for Jim Coyle. Like I said, will be joining us here in a little bit as he flies back from Puerto Rico. And I know that the basketball team, after they were able to get showered up and things, they flew back yesterday after that game. And one of the things that I know Jim did relay to me when our discussion about the game was the fact that when you take into account what all those young men went through, they had some heavy legs in that third game yesterday afternoon, 11 o'clock tip off, but they had some heavy legs out there running around the court. So it's understandable that they were a little sluggish in that third game, but overall, you got to be pleased with where the Hoosiers are at basketball-wise, and the two big wins over the Serbian Mega Superbet team. Like I said, a very renowned team that is known for producing NBA talent. But we're going to talk to Mr. DeCourcy here and get his take on a few things. Mike, how are you today?
I'm well, Shannon. How are you?
I am hanging in there as sitting in here a couple days because Jim decided to take a trip to Puerto Rico.
I was thinking he would do the show from down there, but I guess he didn't want to interrupt his beach time.
Well, you know what? Yesterday we did do some outside scenery that he was able to find a pretty good connection and was able to give us a taste of the beaches and the Caribbean and all that good stuff as we talked prior to Indiana's third game in that tour there in Puerto Rico. And they came away with 3 games under their belt, 3 wins, and 2 of the 3 were really tested the young Hoosier ball club, but they came out on top. So everybody's got to be pleased where Indiana's at coming out of that with a high note. It may not paint a picture of where they'll be come start of the year, but it will help catapult them into this latter part of preparation through August, September, and in October when they get an official start. So I thought it was a good trip for them.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, playing 2 games against Mega, a very capable professional team, was certainly good opposition for them. And having to come back from a significant deficit in the second of the 2 games and then winning comfortably in the end of that, it's easily forgotten that they were down. They had a pretty significant deficit in the second game and had to rally to take control of that game. And then, of course, the third game, they had to fight back late. They were down 6, 8, 10 points in the final stages and were able to manufacture a comeback, not a buzzer win, but they did have to come up with a stop at the buzzer in order to secure the victory. So they got some experience in that environment, in that circumstance. And that's always a good thing, because especially when you go through pre-conference games, you're only going to have a few opportunities to have a game like that. You shouldn't be in many games like that in pre-conference. On occasion, you will, and sometimes you might go into a game against an evenly matched team and either get handled or you might win comfortably, and so you don't get that experience. Okay, what do we do if we're down 8 and there's a couple minutes on the clock. How do we get back in this? And so they got that experience in the tour, and that'll be very valuable for them at some point during the regular season. That there's going to be a circumstance that comes up like that where they're going to have to. I mean, it's inevitable that they're going to have a circumstance like that, and now they have some experience, some institutional knowledge about how to cope with that.
Yeah, in that second game, down, I think 23, 24 points, battled back, but went on a 70-19 run.
Yes.
I've never, ever seen such a run in basketball, either high school, college, NBA. That in itself was a truly amazing feat that they end up, get themselves a W. So like you said, they come away with a wealth of knowledge about themselves, regardless of the score, what they have, the character of the kids that they have. And I think they answered that pretty resoundingly with, they got some character kids that compete and are able to rise to the occasion and play and match physicality at some point, because that mega super bet in that game number 2 kind of punched them in the nose.
Right.
And as a coach, as a former coach, college ball, number of years I did it, that is always what you're wanting to see. When you get punched in the nose, how does your team react? Do they have the character to, bow up and, fight back and compete back? Or do they, kind of wave the white flag and, surrender? And you can say that Indiana bowed up and took the fight to them. And that's why they came out victorious in the second game, but more so in that third game, because like you said, down the majority of the game, they just hung around and made some shots they needed late.
Yes.
And got the W.
And they did that. There one thing that came out of the tour, and with limited opportunity to observe, but one of the things that came out of the tour statistically was Connor Enright fouling out of 2 games, the two competitive games. The first game wasn't highly competitive, but the 2 competitive games against Mega, he fouled out of both of them. And so they were able to make that late comeback in the second game without their expected point guard.
Yeah.
So that was a good sign as well. But also there's the fact that Connor's going to have to make sure he plays without fouling. There are a lot of good guards. There's one right up the road. You may know about Braden Smith.
Yeah.
So there's one right up the road that you have to be able to cope with defensively without fouling. You have to be an effective player in that. I don't think that Connor came to Indiana with anybody expecting him to be Gary Payton. But you have to do your job and you have to stay in the game. And so that's something that they'll have to address. But the experience itself, the trip from a bonding element, I've never heard a team go on one of these foreign tours and come back saying, well, man, I hated spending those 5-6 days with those guys. It always makes teams closer and more comfortable with one another. So a good experience from that standpoint as well.
And they kept him active. I know that's one thing that I talked with Jim about yesterday evening, and he says, you can consider on what they did on the days off. They were still active, and he said they had some heavy legs in that game against the Superbet in the second one, which is understandable. But today, after we get out there, I read your article that you had on the Sporting News about the preseason poll debate. And I know Chris Kleiman at Kansas State was very vocal about banning it, not having it. I've always felt that that poll is more of brand awareness poll, more so than some things, because you get past 10 or 11 or 12 in that poll, it's, like throwing darts against the wall since you don't have any data. Where I got surprised by it was where Indiana fell in that poll at number 20, having been in the college football playoffs, and at the end of the year was in the top 10. So you had some pretty good responses for that, and I thought they were quite interesting. But, what is your feeling of these preseason polls that come out? Is too much voice given to them because of they really are just a glimpse in time where people may think where a team lies? Because like the Sports Illustrated had Indiana at number 10.
Right. Well, I think that Ralph Russo, who I spoke to, who now works for The Athletic and for 20 years was basically the voice of the poll. He gathered it. He wrote it up for the AP for 20 years, and now he works for The Athletic. And so he now is a voter. He is one of the voters. I don't know exactly how many they have. They usually, I know in basketball, they've usually had 60 plus. I don't know if they have as many for the football or not. I've never been involved with the football poll. I am a poll agnostic, honestly. I've never liked them. I participated in the AP basketball poll in the early 90s. And I did it, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and they don't compensate you for it. I don't believe that they still don't compensate you for it, which is part of the part. Like, why would I do this work for free? Is a question that I've never quite understood. And so, and after I did it for 2 years, the vote was taken away from me. And I asked, well, why was it taken away from me? And I was told it was someone else's turn. And that was when I said, I'm never voting again. I said, if you don't appreciate that my voice matters, then I'm out. And so was asked subsequently, and I won't participate because you don't hand the vote to somebody who is not into basketball just because it's their turn if you want it to be taken seriously.
Right.
And so I don't take any of this seriously at all. I don't care what the polls say from week to week. As a basketball writer, this is true. I don't do as much off-season basketball as I used to, but I'm still there if something comes up. But for 25 years of my career or so, I was almost 24/7, 365 college basketball. And I maybe looked at the polls once or twice a year if there was something I needed to know. I mean, I don't pay attention to them at all. Mm-hmm. When I do the brackets now for Fox Sports, I don't ever look at the polls. They don't have any play at all in what I do in projecting the brackets. And so when people complain about these to the extent of saying that they should be banned, I think that's absurd, Shannon. It's a ridiculous statement. If you don't like them, don't pay attention to them. What they want is what the coaches want is they want both sides of it. They want the polls so that they can say, hey, we were number 12 or whatever. But then on the other side, when they're not accurate or their teams don't turn out to be their team's accomplishments aren't reflected well, then they complain about them. I just don't pay attention. Ralph made a very good point, though, was that they are the only thing in college football, basically, that has been consistent for 80 years. The AP poll was introduced in 1936. So they have it has history to it. And I appreciate that. That part of it, I'm a sports historian to an extent. I mean, I'm not a study, but I don't study it like a lot of people do, but it's important to me. And so I appreciate that part of it. But the idea that anybody would suggest to ban it, Shannon, what you're doing is you're telling media organizations what they can and can't publish. You can't do that in this country, not yet anyway.
No, and again, I'm kind of with you. Turn the channel if you don't want to look, watch, that way. I think say this real quick here because we up against a break here, but I think the biggest thing with the polls that it seems to me is too much weight is given to them in a debate on whether a team is or isn't good enough in that regard. And I think Indiana, as you can see there is still a quote unquote lack of brand awareness, even though they went to the college football playoffs and so forth and so on. And nobody wants to, let this 2024 season, go in the rearview mirror every reporter in America right now, and SEC especially, is still wanting to talk about Indiana's 2024 season and how soft their schedule was and so forth and so on. So I guess that's where sometimes you get like a little jaded in some of the polls that come out when you look at it and say, is there a quote unquote conspiracy to, bury Indiana in a poll or not? But hey,
well, let me explain to you, Shannon, exactly why Indiana's 20 and not higher. They lost their quarterback. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. They lost their quarterback. Is the quarterback who replaced last year's quarterback good? They don't know.
Right.
And they're not looking for it. They just know that the quarterback who was really good a year ago is gone. And so that's they are down at 20. And of course, that's among the many things that have to happen well for Indiana this year to succeed like they did last year. And I do believe the schedule is going to be more difficult. But what bothers me about the whole schedule argument against Indiana is simply that they played the two teams that competed in the previous year's national championship. Were those 2 years two teams having peak years? No. But that Michigan team that Indiana beat then went out and handled in a bowl game an Alabama team that was playing with their draftable quarterback and all that stuff. So it wasn't like everybody checked out. And Michigan went out and beat them and pretty much handled them. I mean, it wasn't a blowout, but it was their game. So the idea that was a total schedule creation is nonsense, because it's not easy to win every game, Shannon.
Oh, no.
I covered college football on a daily basis for 20 years. It is not easy to win every game, no matter who's on your schedule, because by the time you get to 5, 6, 7, 8, they're coming for you. They may not be having a great year, but taking you out of the undefeated ranks is going to make their year. And nobody was able to do it until Ohio State, which was the eventual national champion.
Yeah, no question. And of course, Michigan went into Columbus and beat Ohio State in their own backyard after Indiana had beaten them. And prior to the season starting, like you said, everybody looked at that schedule with the two previous national champion and runner-up and didn't say that's a soft schedule. And everybody says they didn't beat a ranked team. Well, when Nebraska came to town, they were ranked number 25 in the country. And everybody kind of just forgets that because Indiana throttled them. So we'll let that die. We're going to take a break here. Come back here on the Indiana Sports Radio. More with Mike DeCourcy right after this.
Know a team or group needing a fundraiser? Boost Fundraising raises more money faster and offers the most unique and user-friendly online fundraiser in the nation. Your team receives personalized fundraising pages for each team member. Free team-branded promo gifts shipped to each donor. Boost Fundraising does it all. Sports teams, marching bands, charity causes, and community groups. Go to boostfundraising.com and be sure to enter the promo code COYLE, that's COYLE, to receive a discounted fundraiser. Located on 325 acres in beautiful Brown County, Indiana, Hard Truth Distilling Company is the biggest and the best craft distillery around. While Hard Truth is already known for producing internationally awarded whiskeys and spirits like Hard Truth Sour Mash Bourbons, Sweet Mash, and Hard Road Ryes, as well as their cinnamon vodka and the always popular Toasted Coconut Rum. Hard Truth Distillery offers so much more. With a full-service restaurant, ATV, and distillery tours, as well as live music, you can spend an entire day at Hard Truth Distillery while making your entire family or group happy. And that's the Hard Truth. Hard Truth products are available across Indiana, as well as many other states. So no matter where you shop, if they don't carry your favorite Hard Truth product, tell them you want the truth, the Hard Truth. Hard Truth Distilling Company encourages you to enjoy all of their products responsibly and to never drink and drive.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio alongside Mike DeCourcy. I'm the Coach Shannon Griffith sitting in for Jim Coyle this morning, who will be joining us a little later. I think his flight may have already landed in Indianapolis. Now, there was some big question because it was a 2:30 flight, whether or not he made it to that flight. So we'll see here because he's probably scrambling to get to a place to set up. But one other thing I wanted to add to that debate we just said here, this is the number of teams. SEC has 10 in the top 25. Big 10 has 6, 4 in the Big 12, 3 ACC, of course, Notre Dame, and then 1 in the Mountain West. So you can kind of see there the spread of that. But enough said about preseason polls, and they don't really mean anything until you get them between the white lines and start playing. Then you can have your debates about this and that. But an interesting story, too, that you had written there for the Sporting News was Shador Sanders. All of a sudden, from the NFL debacle, draft party and prank phone call, and finally being drafted down the rank, so to speak, he becomes all of a sudden QB1 because the Browns have quarterback injury issues.
Yes.
Which I've never seen that many guys, injured in the preseason at quarterback, because they brought 4 into preseason. Well, 3 of the 4 were hurt. All of a sudden, Shador gets elevated to QB1. And I have to say, watching that game, he actually played pretty decently for his first preseason start on the road in Carolina. 14 of 23, 61% completions, 138 yards, a couple touchdowns, no interceptions, which is huge, and ended up with a quarterback rating of 106.8. So I know that you had an article on that talking about, kind of the ironic aspect of that whole scenario there. What did you think of his performance in that game for a kid that's had a lot of scrutiny, a lot of negative press for that matter? All of a sudden showing up in a game and doing what he did there for the Browns.
I thought he did a fine job. I did watch his segment of the game. I didn't watch. I thumbed through the defensive part. I wasn't really all that wired up about watching the Browns D, but I did want to see how he performed, and I thought he played well. I didn't think that he played as well as some on Twitter suggested. I mean, they had him really close to, like measuring the distance between how far is it from Cleveland to Canton geographically? How long does it take to get there in a car? That sort of thing. It was pretty ridiculous from that standpoint, but I thought he played fine. And I find his circumstance fascinating, Coach, because he is the 4th quarterback on the depth chart. He was the lowest priority of the players in the sense of, they brought in Joe Flacco to start. As long as Flacco's healthy, he's going to be out there game 1. That you have Kenny Pickett, who was brought Pete, and then they drafted Dylan Gabriel, and still kind of a mystery why, after you spent a draft pick on a 3rd rounder, a 3rd round draft pick on a quarterback, why you'd come back in the 5th round and take Shador, unless you thought that he could perform well. And then you could either leverage Dylan Gabriel into a draft pick or Shador into a draft pick in a transaction, because otherwise you're going to have to expose one of them to waivers, or you're going to have to expose Pickett to waivers, one of those 3, and then sign whoever gets through, presumably, or either lose them or sign whoever gets through to the practice squad. And I don't honestly see that any of them would get through waivers. Pickett maybe, but I think they have better plans for Pickett, and I'm not exactly sure what the cap implications of letting him go would be. I think it would cost them a little bit more than they'd probably want. So it's still a sort of a vexing to me why you would select him, unless you thought that you could get something out of a good preseason performance from him or Gabriel. And frankly, whoever gets out of there is probably the winner, because next season, with where they are at quarterback, the odds of them not wanting to spend what will probably be a reasonably high 1st rounder on what is gauged as, by those who would know, a pretty deep quarterback class.
Right.
So if they're back in the market for a quarterback again next year, then Gabriel or Sanders would be much better elsewhere, where they could have a full year to compete, a full year to get themselves invested in another scheme, and maybe eventually climb the depth chart in that location.
Yeah. I can't imagine Flacco being more than just 1 year.
Yes.
In Cleveland, kind of situation he had with the Colts a year ago, and the fact that he was there to back up, but then got forced into service. Yeah, I never understood why they brought Pickett in and then drafted Gabriel, then only turn around and draft Sanders. Now, I think the biggest thing is, what to me he showed in that preseason game, accuracy, which is huge.
Yes.
The ability to extend plays for mobility, because he's not that, he's not a nimble guy, I would say, but he was mobile enough to avoid some rushes, do the right thing, get rid of the ball or get the ball down the field, because he made a couple big throws. But you almost felt like that was an audition outside of what Cleveland has in store for him, but maybe, like you said, of setting up something trade-wise, whether it is now or at the end of this preseason status or after, for the season from that standpoint. I just can't imagine them keeping 4 quarterbacks with one or two of them on the, the practice squad. That just doesn't make any sense. But it's an interesting aspect to it because of the negativity that surrounded that kid. Some of it well earned too, because of some of his things that, antics that he had leading up to the draft and things of that nature. But to me, I was, I guess you could say proud, but I thought it was a good showing for a young man that had a ton of negativity, doubts of whether or not he was capable in the NFL, for him to go out and perform the way he did in a short period of time after knowing that everybody else in front of him was an IR. So it's the old adage, one man's misery is another man's gain. And he was the one that got the gain out of that against the Panthers and such. I don't know where they are with these other 3 injuries. I didn't see any other write-ups that said how many weeks or days these other guys are going to be out, but you got to feel that the second preseason game, he may get a lot of playing time again.
Yeah. Gabriel has returned to practice. Pickett still has not, which is certainly concerning for him and for the Browns to an extent, because I think they were counting on him. I think Flacco's fine. I think he's just not, like, there's no reason for him to play in the first preseason game, and I'm not sure there's any reason for him to play in any preseason games, because he's 40 years old and he is who he is. I guess that you could make the argument that he could use the practice in terms of getting connected with his team. But in those circumstances, most of the time, they're only going to play a couple of series anyway. So I'm not sure how much connection you can build in that circumstance. I guess it's just the familiarity of playing in the stadium. But it's really more about the others than it is about him, because he's done that for nearly 20 years. So not worried about him. So I do think he'll get more opportunity this week, even if Gabriel is healthy, ready to go. And even if he starts, Sanders will get at least a half a football and an opportunity again to verify what he did in the first game. The problem he has, Shannon, the reason why I didn't want the Steelers to draft him and why I understood that the NFL wasn't super excited about him, and that I still don't understand why the draft experts, so many of them, overlooked it. He doesn't have an outstanding arm. He's unbelievably accurate. There's no question. He's really, really accurate. But his arm is not he's not a high-end NFL arm, and he's not a high-end NFL athlete. Like if you are Justin Fields, you're a high-end NFL athlete. So if you don't, and I'm not saying Justin's arm isn't great, but it's a very good arm.
Right. It is.
But if you don't have that great arm, you at least can say, yeah, but I can do this. Or if you are Ben Roethlisberger, who wasn't that mobile. He was hard to bring down, but he wasn't mobile. But he had a high-end NFL arm. when he was young. So like you have to have something that makes you stand out if you want them to take you. And Shador didn't have either of those two qualities. And the physical ability to play at the NFL level is really important. Unless you're Tom Brady, and maybe Shador is. I can't rule it out, but nobody saw Tom Brady coming either. But what Tom Brady was not a high-end NFL athlete, and he had a probably above average arm, but not elite. But he processed like no one had ever seen before. He went from 1, 2, 3 like no one's ever done before in the game. And that's why he was the best. Okay, so if Shador is that, great, but it's hard to see that coming because until you put somebody into an NFL game against NFL defenses, you can't really judge whether they can do that. You can project it, and some of the draft analysts apparently did because there were Mel Kiper had him as high as 5 on his big board. So he thought he was the 5th best prospect in the draft. So he's saying, yeah, I think he's Tom Brady. That's basically what he's saying. Maybe not Tom Brady level, but someone you can approximate to Tom Brady. That's what you're saying if you are judging Shador that high. I don't think any of the NFL teams was comfortable saying that he could be that. And so that's what he's up against as he tries to create an NFL career.
Yeah, no question. And in the NFL, accuracy in some respects trumps arm strength. Not that it's, way higher than, but you have to have that accuracy as a quarterback where you're completing well above the 60% mark in a game because most of your routes are in that medium to short range routes. And if you cannot be accurate at that level,
yes,
you have no prayer of being able to play. None. And I don't care how strong your arm is. If you're not accurate on the short level throws, you might as well stand on the bench because you're not going to play in the NFL. And that, for that matter, in college nowadays. One thing I should tell you, when I was at Ball State, I recruited Mr. Ben Roethlisberger.
Aha.
I'll have to tell you that story at one time because he broke my heart in a million pieces. But I'll tell you it another time because it's one of those stories where I was like, this was either going to make me or break me, and he broke me. But again, yeah, you're correct. The accuracy is the biggest thing. He is not a overly nimble, mobile type of guy. He probably is maybe a 5-flat 40 guy. I don't even think he's that. But again, it does come down to playing in the game. How does he play in the game? Like you said, how does he handle things? What does he look for? And is he doing it correctly? And then those things are all brought into the equation on whether you keep him or not, in that regard. Or, like I said, and you said, is he performing and using it as a tryout for the other teams in the NFL that may need that third quarterback that can be a practice squad quarterback and then bring him up on game day if needed. But it's an interesting dynamic because if you flip the script, I don't know if you got to see the Colts game against the Ravens and the debate there with AR and Daniel Jones, and Anthony Richards within the first series gets blown up because he doesn't do the right thing, on pass protection.
Right.
Or, whether he was just to change it or whether he was to throw hot, we can all sit here and try to debate that. We don't know the call and how they teach it or coach it. But as a former quarterback coach, that was a pretty standard pressure that you see quite frequently. And for him to completely blow it and then get his finger dislocated, it was like, in some ways good because that may sink in now. Either I get the pressure, either I get the protection the right way, or I'm going to get blown up. But his problem has been accuracy.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if you get to see any of that, but then Daniel Jones comes in and actually played pretty decently. But the one player that I wanted to talk to you about was Riley Leonard, because he actually had a pretty good half of football there. And he's one of those guys that I do think may have the mental capacity to be that Tom Brady-ish type of player. What's your thoughts on Riley Leonard, NFL, and, kind of seeing him and where his trajectory may be down the road in the NFL?
Yeah, I think he is one of those guys that first of all, when you're in the circumstance that he's in, when you're drafted as late as he was, just making the team is the first goal, and then hoping that there's an opportunity for you to do something beyond that. You don't want anybody ahead of you to get hurt, but you have to go into camp and you have to excel, and you have to be someone that they like working with and that they feel like they can trust you in order to be around the team, that you'll give a good look in practice, that you'll study, that you'll be good with the other players. And then you have to sort of wait for your opportunity. I mean, it happened for Brock Purdy, a lot of disappointment for other players in the Niners organization, but an opportunity for Purdy, and he seized it. The same for Tom Brady when he was a 6th round pick, and he worked his way up to being right there when Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and then he seized that opportunity. So that's what Leonard has to do. Ahead of him are two guys who have varying degrees of talent and experience. Jones has been in the league for several years now. I think people have seen that he's a very nimble runner, but he's not been the most accurate passer, and that's been a problem for him. I think Anthony Richardson has been someone that it's pretty obvious that the Colts really rolled the dice on him. They saw the physical tools, and they said, we can't pass this up. And sometimes you need to pass that up. Because he hasn't shown at any point. Now, I think this is year 4. Is it year 3 or year 4?
That's a good question. They all kind of run together. And
but we're at a point now where you should feel good about this. And I don't think they do yet. And I don't think he has given you reason to. And some of it's been injury, bad luck. But as you mentioned before, sometimes you create your own injury, bad luck. I think for Leonard, just, do your job, do it as well as possible, and hope that the opportunity comes to you. I don't know, again, whether he has those physical tools to quite the level that you'd want in order to be a starting quarterback. Again, that's why he lasted until the 6th round. The same as Will Howard here in Pittsburgh. I mean, Will was the national champion quarterback. Mm-hmm. He had some good runs in the college football season. He had some really nice throws, obviously, and they win it. And he showed a championship medal, but only the 6th round before the Steelers selected him. They were very excited about him, but he had the bad luck in practice of hurting his hand. I believe it was on a center exchange. Yeah, somebody's finger got wrong or whatever, and he I believe he has a broken finger, and so he's set back. So Riley just has to keep doing his job and hoping he doesn't have a piece of bad luck like that, and eventually he will get an opportunity. And then it's just, you have to seize that opportunity the minute it happens, because even if you do seize it, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get a second. But if you don't seize the first one, you won't get the second.
Well, yeah, and you like going back to your analogy there with Anthony about the Colts drafting him and where he was drafted, and I didn't think that was a good pick in my own opinion, because he only had 18 true college starts. He really, even at that, he was hit or miss at Florida, in some of their games. Now he's a big kid. He's like 6'3", 6'4", and he's about 240, 235, something like that. So he's a big, strong kid. And when he runs the ball, he's a formidable foe out on the perimeter and such. But you don't bring in Daniel Jones if you don't think that Anthony Richardson is the guy, because you're just paying all this money for a guy to sit potentially. Right. So that battle is still up in the air. And I don't know if it's a good battle for the Colts to be in right now with, new coordinator on defense, all the things there, and a pretty decent offensive line coming back. Not great, not bad, but it's one of those things that I'm afraid it's going to be a controversy all the way up till week 1. Now, what I think will happen, Anthony Richardson is going to be the starter and Daniel Jones is going to be the backup. And they're going to give Anthony a chance, but he's going to be on a short leash, is kind of how I see it. But I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. But from my perspective, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterback in that regard. And
if they're going to make him the starter, I mean, I would give him the first half of the year. That's because if you're going to go in that direction, you have to see if it works or not. And you're not going to know based on a couple of failures. Jalen Hurts last year started the year pretty poorly. They went into their bye. They were very fortunate to have a bye after a month, the Eagles. And they said, okay, we got to fix some things. It's not just Jalen, it's us too. We got to change some things to make it work for him so that it can all work. And they end up winning the Super Bowl as a result. So you have to, if you're going to go with the player that you invested in, that you believed in, then you've got to give him some time to work it out. And unless he's a complete disaster for 4 consecutive games, I don't think that you should make you should be making a change, even though you brought in Daniel Jones, you paid him $14 million, and you expect him to be a high-end backup and an alternate starter. I think you have to give Richardson some time, or you just are acknowledging that you totally blew the pick. If you're looking at this season as a referendum on your position, so to speak, if you're the coach or GM, then you've got to look at your ability to get the best out of this very physically talented player as part of that referendum.
Well, there's no question that Ballard is on the proverbial hot seat, and this right now is his team. These are guys that he's either drafted or brought in via free agency. So there's no question there. Losing Irsay, a month ago, and the girls stepping into the equation, they've already made kind of that statement that they're going to be a little bit more aggressive than what Pops was the latter part of his, NFL GM days. And I do think that's the case. I don't think it's the case with Steichen, because I think he's been dealt the hand he's been dealt. Now, whether he's had much input to that, I don't know. But I do think he's a pretty darn good ball coach and has pretty good offensive mind. I just don't think necessarily they've been on the same page with Ballard, because Ballard makes there's selections he's made or whatever, and you just scratch your head. Like, why are we drafting that guy, in that regard? And the same thing with Anthony Richardson at that point. It was one of those head scratchers, but we shall see in that regard. But I want to thank you for being with us here today on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. It was great to talk with you. And I do see, I think Jimmy's made it and arrived on set here. Let me see if I can bring in another view of some sort. I can't even get him into the picture. Oh, man. But I will take a break here. And Mike, I appreciate you being here with us today, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, partner. We'll see you. We're going to step aside. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Michael Nizolek from the Herald-Times there in Bloomington will be joining us, as Mr. Jim Coyle will be as well, all right here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
Know a team or group needing a fundraiser? Boost Fundraising raises more money faster and offers the most unique and user-friendly online fundraiser in the nation. Your team receives personalized fundraising pages for each team member. Free team-branded promo gifts shipped to each donor. Boost Fundraising does it all. Sports teams, marching bands, charity causes, and community groups. Go to boostfundraising.com and be sure to enter the promo code COYLE, that's COYLE, to receive a discounted fundraiser. Located on 325 acres in beautiful Brown County, Indiana, Hard Truth Distilling Company is the biggest and the best craft distillery around. While Hard Truth is already known for producing internationally awarded whiskeys and spirits like Hard Truth Sour Mash Bourbons, Sweet Mash, and Hard Road Ryes, as well as their cinnamon vodka and the always popular Toasted Coconut Rum. Hard Truth Distillery offers so much more. with a full-service restaurant, ATV, and distillery tours, as well as live music. You can spend an entire day at Hard Truth Distillery while making your entire family or group happy. And that's the Hard Truth. Hard Truth products are available across Indiana as well as many other states. So no matter where you shop, if they don't carry your favorite Hard Truth product, tell them you want the truth, the Hard Truth. Hard Truth Distilling Company encourages you to enjoy all of their products responsibly and to never drink and drive.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle. I'm the Coach Shannon Griffith. Just spoke with Mike DeCourcy, and we can see that Mr. Jim Coyle has arrived in Indianapolis and has made his journey with that 2:30 flight this morning to get back here, back home in Indiana. How we doing? How we feeling, most of all?
I'm back home again in Indiana. I feel as good as I can feel after having a 2:40 a.m. flight, but it wasn't that bad, I'll be honest with you, other than it was completely full.
Wow.
Someone asked me, well, who's going to be taking the flight? I'm like, a lot of people, apparently.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. Good to be back home, kind of. I'm not going to say I don't miss where I was. But yeah, good to be back because there's so much going on, so much happening. We're getting later and later in the football fall camp. I know you talked a lot about that excessively, but before I joined, and basketball, well, having this taste, you've got a ways to wait now.
Yeah.
Now you've got to wait a while, so which is good and will create excitement. And I tell you the thing about this these exhibition games in Puerto Rico for Indiana, they will do just that. They are going to create excitement because people like myself that were there to see what went on are probably going to change their opinion on what the possibilities for Indiana might be, because that's still a hard thing to quantify against teams that are unknown quantities. This has like become the hardest science experiment in the history of the world, trying to figure out, who's going to do what each season when you know what they have on paper, but you don't really know what they have, and that's in either sport.
Well, Alec Lashley had a great breakdown of the three games and the productivity of each guy and from the trip. And to say that the young pup, Trent Sicily, had a pretty good showing for 3 games would be an understatement. Now, he didn't score as much in that second game against Mega Superbet, but overall, you look at his performance overall, you have to think that that was a positive coming out of that.
Yeah, you can't look at scoring for any of these guys as far as being a main contributor, because they all contribute in different ways all the time. It's amazing, whether we're talking about diving on the floor and slapping a ball that may end up getting recovered by your team. There's so many unquantifiable things that go on, and he's always doing those kinds of things, as is the other players, but he's contributing. If he's on the floor, he's contributing, usually in a positive way. Not that there aren't going to be mistakes. There are. Everybody's going to make them at all levels. So, but and not just Trent, but Alexa Ristic, the other freshman, I guess if you will, that they picked up from Serbia. However, they're both going to be fantastic players for this Indiana program. Ristic he's player ready as well, man.
Yeah.
He was fun to watch. Fans, I keep using the same phrase. Indiana fans are really going to enjoy watching this team. Just how they compete. There's something that obviously they don't like, and that is to lose, because they just refused to do it in both of those games. And it was very fun, refreshing to see just from a product standpoint, but that is truly, I believe, what Indiana fans are going to get game in and game out, as this team and they all do it. It's not one guy. It's not people having to get on other people. Man, they all are. This is actually a team that is working together. The benches are always involved. The coaches are always involved with the benches. And it's just a complete cycle.
Yeah.
And it works.
You know what reminded me, you just said something there that kind of reminded me of what Coach Signetti had mentioned when he first came in to Bloomington about changing the mindset and having, he didn't have the opportunity to do a preseason, and he had to do it as the season went on, about having that mentality of winning and losing is such a small differential. But to change a mindset, you've got to fully buy in. I gotta believe these 3 games helps form the mindset of this ball club, as you put it, as a team that is scrappy, is never out of it, and plays together as a team, even on the 3rd game of a 3-game tour. And like you said, they were going every day. It wasn't like on their days off they were, sitting by the pool and all those things. They were doing stuff, and it became a situation where, they had heavy legs in that game yesterday.
Yeah, they had just been doing everything, like I said, with all the excursions and getting in the water and the heat. And let me tell you, the heat alone will take it out of you. But you put all that together, and basketball, the travel, that's a lot to ask of an athletic team that normally is focused on the game ahead. Well, that wasn't the plan here. There were events with fans and interactions, all kinds of things going on. So they did a clinic. So their time was really managed, and they were spending a lot of it. So they were getting, it's okay though. They're getting stretched. They're getting strained, as that's what you do in early season. You push and you push and you push to create a finished product. And to imagine after seeing the comebacks, those comeback games, and to think that this is not even close to a finished product, I got to tell you, my opinion, and I'm stealing this from I think it was Ant Wright, but my opinion on Indiana basketball coming up has changed. Not that I had one per se, because I did not have a baseline. Mm-hmm. Didn't know, but now it's like hell. Not only do we know, I'm like, wonder where they're going to compete here, because I can see them competing. I've said this with like Purdue from a man-to-man standpoint. And I don't know, Illinois is a whole nother deal, but I don't think it's really going to matter, because it's how Indiana plays. They play relentless. They don't always come out, or haven't yet, these first 2 games, with that relentlessness, because they've gotten down in both games substantially. Well, actually, in both. Yeah. They were down 23 in one and 20 in another. But the difference between those games is the second game, they were down into the second half. I mean, it was still going. It was not, they hadn't muted. I mean, they'd gotten back off that 20-point run, but they got it to like 12, and they could get it to 8, but it just kept bouncing back up to 12. And it stayed that way for quite some time. And I'm like, boy, I don't know if Mega Superbet's going to give it up today. And they just kept chipping and kept until they find a crack. Yeah. It's like they keep going until they find a crack. And buddy, once they find that, they hit that for all they're worth and just start exploiting people. And all of a sudden, they're able to get this defensive stop, pile up to some defensive stops, and then that turns into offense for Indiana. And it's happened both times against the same team, but a very good team. This is not some Joe Schmoes, man. These guys are good. There's an NBA prospect on that team. And they were physical. And I cannot imagine a better scenario for Indiana than to have played Mega Super Bet here. The first game, it was an exhibition game, literally, in all aspects. These two, that was legit. And so with 3 more months now to hone their skills, Indiana's, I cannot imagine them finishing below the upper level of the upper half. But we'll see. There's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten this year. Purdue and Michigan, of course, we know of. But the Illini that spoke up, Michigan State, UCLA, it's always a tough road to hoe. You've got games out on the West Coast. You've got to add travel into this, which I think that pretty much covers travel when you do what they did in the situation in Puerto Rico with kayaking and zip lining or whatever all that they did, and being in the sun and all that, because you won't be doing any of that when you play these games. You'll be resting in the hotel room. So maybe they need to start doing some excursions everywhere they go.
Yeah. Well, they came up on the right side of it with a great 3-game stretch there in Puerto Rico. And you got it, like you said, pleased and excited for what this team may become. Can't get too overexcited because we still have some time between that and the first true game of the year. But glad to see you that you're back. We're going to take another break. And on the other side of this, we hope to have Herald-Times Mike Niziolek here with us to talk some Indiana football and scrimmage from this past Saturday, all right here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
The ISC Sports Network is your home for sports content across the Hoosier State. Find us live on TV and streaming or archived on our website and our app. The ISC is your one-stop shop for the content you want to see, including high school sports, college sports, and other great events throughout the year. Subscribe to our streaming service and get access to it all. ISC, local lives here.
Know a team or group needing a fundraiser? Boost Fundraising raises more money faster and offers the most unique and user-friendly online fundraiser in the nation. Your team receives personalized fundraising pages for each team member. Free team-branded promo gifts shipped to each donor. Boost Fundraising does it all. Sports teams, marching bands, charity causes, and community groups. Go to boostfundraising.com and be sure to enter the promo code COYLE, that's COYLE, to receive a discounted fundraiser. If you're looking for a new home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore from Brick and Ivy Realty. Cheryl Sizemore has over 2 decades of experience, and that could be the difference in getting the home you want in today's tough housing market. Reach out to Cheryl at CherylSizemore@gmail.com or 317-701-0838. That's 317-701-0838. Let Cheryl Sizemore sell or find your new home today. When it comes to apparel and promotions, FreeThink has you covered, literally, whether it's 24 or 200 shirts for sports leagues, businesses, or groups. FreeThink Apparel and Promotions can also create your very own merchandising store. FreeThink Apparel and Promotions did it for Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and they can do it for you. Whether it's screen printing, embroidery, digital printing, promotional products, vehicle wraps, or anything else under the promotional line. See what FreeThink Apparel and Promotions can do for you at freethinkapparel.com.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on Tuesday. And we welcome all you that are listening to us today, especially on our radio stations throughout the state, like 1380 The Fan up in Fort Wayne, my home station, The Ref down in Evansville, 97.7, and then WJOB up in the Chicago-Hammond area. We appreciate you all tuning in to Indiana Sports Beat Radio and appreciate your listening to us today. I'm going to bring Michael in here next, and let's see if I'm having trouble with the 3-man deal here.
There you go.
There we go. I finally hit the right button. Mike, how you doing?
I'm good, Shannon. How are you doing?
Great. We're doing great. Jim just got back from Puerto Rico, and we're glad to have you here to talk some Indiana football this morning. Finish up that second week with the scrimmage on Saturday. And I know Coach Cignetti had a, media availability yesterday. I'm not sure. Did you figure out or hear why they end up not having practice open yesterday, the other morning? Or did they say?
Yeah, just a scheduling thing, just a miscommunication. I think they had a walkthrough, not a full practice. And so it wouldn't have been something we would able for us to see. So, I think there's 2 more left for in camp in terms of open availabilities, open windows to see. So we'll have those here over the next week.
Yeah, we're fastly approaching the first contest against Old Dominion. But from that session yesterday, and you had a chance to speak with him a little bit on the scrimmage, kind of what was his overall thought coming out of that scrimmage, being that it was his first one, Fernando Mendoza's first, summertime to get things rolling and things like that. What was Coach Sig's take on that first scrimmage there in Bloomington?
Very similar to what he said last year. I think he actually used the same line. Some good, some bad, some ugly.
Typical coach.
So there's a lot of penalties. It's interesting. They don't go live, so I mean that's also something that is notable. That was their first fully padded practice, but he doesn't tend to put extra, a ton of extra weight on scrimmages. If the practice before and the practice after aren't any good, what's the difference if you have a good scrimmage, right? Like once consistency. He's not a guy that's sort of I think day in, day out, he'd rather see consistency than have a great scrimmage and not practice well, sort of like I said, in between. So that's kind of what I've taken from he's not big on giving kind of details or standout guys. Just overall happy, because he kind of talked about it in terms of like the whole week, where he was happy with sort of the effort and the competition. That's kind of how he talked about things. You're not going to get a ton out of him about the scrimmage or individual practices. That's just how it kind of is.
Well, hey Mike, how are you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Jim?
Good to see you. I know that a lot of the top 25 bowls are coming out now, and one theme that I saw coming, and I have seen it here of late, is Indiana is still not being seen as that quote unquote team that they're always mentioned as an also, but Illinois seems to be the team this year that is gathering the attention as one that could break that Big Ten mold and get into that top 4 for a CFP berth. But I think that Indiana is being overlooked a little bit again, and I think that is where Coach Cignetti likes to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they were 19 in the coaches and 20 in the AP poll. To me, if you look at their schedule, they got three teams above them, including two of the top two teams in the top 10 in both polls, Penn State and obviously Oregon. So, I mean, if you're going to win, 2 of those 3 games against kind of that group above you, you're going to be in a position to be a playoff team. I don't think, they have to do as much work as they have, like last year it took to week 9, 10 for them to sort of, I think, people to feel like they deserve to be sort of among the top teams in the country, ranked that way. This year, it's not going to take that long. They're going to win week 4 against Illinois, and they're probably back up where Illinois is right now. We're in that 12 spot. I could see, and when you think about what happened the last time they were picked in the preseason in 2021, it was a disaster. So, I think that's probably still maybe fresh in, some people's minds, and they want to see them prove it. And so, top 20 ranking, when you kind of look at they're on the screen right now, I might have them above Texas A&M and Oklahoma, but in Florida. But I mean, and maybe Michigan, but 15 versus 20, I don't think there's that much of a difference in terms of, that impacting their season or that impacting their place. They're going to be able to prove that they belong among the top teams just because they have, a pretty strong schedule this year in terms of the Big Ten part of it, where they have to go on the road and face some really tough teams. And obviously that Illinois game looms large.
Yeah, those games 4, 5, and 6 are going to be instant benchmarks for Indiana's season, and that will be a very telltale sign, obviously. But I also they have to win. They have to go 10-2 to make the CFP. Right? I think most of us know that, and that's not even a guarantee. But I think that they have to beat one of these teams on the road, just because to start to get people to permanently believe that this program is really for real. But they've got to go out and get that classic win that they haven't gotten yet. Although they had a classic season, they need that win over a perennially a good program like in Iowa, even in Oregon, say Penn State. But they've got to win at one of those places to me this year to kind of really take it a step up.
Well, yeah, if they want to be a playoff contender, I mean, they probably got to win, obviously at least one of the 3 road games, like you said, to finish 10-2. If they were to lose to Iowa, they probably, realistically, it'd be tough to win both of them. But I mean, you can't make any more mistakes kind of on the schedule. So it'll be interesting. I think the Illinois game will tell us a lot about who they are and what they're capable of. If they, can win at home against a good team, I mean, that has you feeling pretty good about that Iowa game. Where, as you know, I think the Illinois game, Illinois is probably a better team, but going on the road in a tough environment, like you said, you got to kind of prove it. So it'll be interesting. That like you said, that 3-game stretch, we'll know what Indiana is after that 3-game stretch.
Coach.
Yeah, Mike, going back to the scrimmage the other day, the defense seemed to be a little banged up. And I know that Hardy, Pons, Farrell, all did not really play in that scrimmage, so to speak. Is there any update on those guys, or, was it, these are significant injuries or your typical bumps and bruises that one gets during this camp season?
Yeah, he said, Pons, I guess, tweaked his ankle during the scrimmage and missed it. And then he said he was, participated on Monday. Hardy was back as well, or trending back. So, he made it sound like those guys, were okay or will be okay. Unfortunately for Amari Farrell, very sad situation. I guess his mother passed away, missed last week, just wasn't with the team. Now he's back, but, terribly sad. So, those things happen in camp in terms of the injuries. You just want to kind of avoid something serious. So far, usually he's up front. He doesn't share a lot, but when a guy is going to miss extended time, he usually will announce that. And they haven't had anything like that as of yet. So that's kind of what you're looking for. They do have some a cushion. He won't say he wants to he's not overlooking those first 3 weeks. But in terms of health, you want your roster healthy for that Illinois game. Everyone fully back and fully ready. So you have a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, and the other thing that is always good in these scrimmages to see if there's any true first-year guys, freshman guys that is kind of flashing and catching the eyes of the coaches that may see them in a position to be a true backup or a lot of special teams play. Did he single out any guys in that way about Saturday's scrimmage? I know that Bond and Baldwin have had pretty decent camps thus far, but I didn't know if he had expanded upon that or not.
No, like I said, he didn't mention anything specific to the scrimmage about players, veteran or new guys. But I think those 2 guys, you kind of hit it. If you're looking at freshmen that could make an impact, those are at the top of the list. I think Baldwin obviously was the highest rated recruit of the class. They felt really strongly about him. Colorado kind of stole him away. Then they fought back. They didn't kind of go away from him. They just kept, they really thought highly of him. And so he was a guy you thought that would come in and be in that position. Bond is a bit of a surprise just in terms of that wide receiver room. I think they've got so much, they got a really good veteran core there. And so it might be hard for him to sort of, knock some of those guys down to get playing time. Charlie Becker was a guy that stood out last year as a freshman, but still was kind of just a specialist just because there wasn't a lot of, reps to go around. But Bond had a really good spring game, and he's kind of, Cignetti mentioned him just kind of continuing on that trend. And so if you're looking for two freshmen that could, be a part of this team, like I said, as specialists or even get some reps on offense or defense, those are the guys that I would bet on.
Yeah, and I know that, like you said, they've continued on from the spring session as they were early enrollees, which I think is a huge benefit. I think half of their incoming class was actually here early on, so that's got to be a beneficial help. Up front on the defensive line, kind of how have you seen that playing out thus far with some of these portal guys that come in? You lose CJ West. And then you pick up Wyatt, the kid from Maryland, Hosa Wheeler, Radcliffe, and then, of course, Tucker, who had some great games a year ago. And how is that all shaping up in your mind for, those spots that they need to have answers for heading into week one?
Yeah, very interesting, because I think when we left the spring, Mario Landino, a sophomore, a guy who stood out last year as a freshman, had kind of taken over that edge spot opposite of Mikel Camara, and now he's kind of moved inside more. And they're really high on him. And then you add the two guys on the edge in terms of Stephen Daly from Kent State, and like I said, Maryland's Kellen Wyatt, and Wyatt's kind of garnered some praise here over the last week in terms of his versatility and the camp he's having. And so it's an interesting mix. I think Hosa Wheeler, has been talked a little bit about, in terms of the impact and potential upside he has. He's probably your CJ West type of guy if there is one on the roster. And so you kind of look at, is the front four then Wheeler, Landino, Wyatt, and Camara? It's an interesting group in terms of, you got the transfers in there, you got a young guy, and then obviously Camara. And then can you establish depth behind those guys? Because you also have Dominic Ratcliffe, like you said, Tucker. It's probably, as much as the offensive line gets talked about, it's probably one of the biggest keys to the season, just because of how impactful that group was last year, how important it is to what Bryant Haynes wants to do, be disruptive, create havoc up front as anything. Probably second to Fernando Mendoza, to be honest. And so how that all comes together and how that looks, it'll be interesting. And last year he really leaned heavily on those top four guys in terms of reps. Does that change this year? Is there more of a mix? They rotated a bit, but I mean, James Carpenter and CJ West down the stretch rarely came off the field for long stretches. And so how it all looks, I think, will be interesting, especially once you get to Big Ten play. So I think everybody's going to play that first 3 weeks. But once you get to Illinois, Iowa, who are those four guys that are shouldering the load?
Yeah, and then you flip it over to the offensive line side of the ball, and I've made this pretty well known, my opinion on this offensive line for Indiana. It may be one of the best offensive lines, paper now, that Indiana's had in a long, long time, especially when they picked up Coogan. He was a huge pickup, and what they had coming back in and around them. What is your take there on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I still think they're look, Drew Evans coming back so quickly from an Achilles injury is remarkable. And is he, there's a difference between being back and being 100% and having sort of the lift off in that foot and the power and the explosiveness. Where is he at in week 4? That's sort of, I think, a spot to watch. He hasn't had any setbacks in camp, but that's still, I mean, that's a really short time. He suffered that injury going into the Michigan game in November. So, I mean, that's a quick turnaround for that kind of injury. You have Benson and Zen sort of on the right side, kind of competing for tackle. What does that look like? Zen was kind of an exception. When Cignetti talks about production over potential, Zen was kind of the opposite, and one of the only transfers that didn't really have the kind of production to his name when he arrived here. Career starts or anything like that. I think he had 2 starts at Ohio State, and all at left tackle. So that to me still, and Benson obviously hasn't had an up and down career. Obviously moved around the line, played a lot of interior here too, but struggled to stay healthy at Colorado. So I do, like I said, Coogan to me is like the sort of straightforward, easy replacement for Kadick, and I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be fine. But I do think there's some question marks how it all kind of comes together in terms of those other spots, how it looks. And I think Carter Smith has the capability. You heard Mikel Camara talk about the other day, he could be the best left tackle in the Big Ten or the country. And he probably has, a kind of a high ceiling and could be, put himself in the NFL draft if he has another good year. So you have the talent there, certainly. And I think you have some depth, but you're not probably without any question marks. I still think it'll be interesting to see, like I said, how that right side shakes out and what Drew Evans looks like after a couple of weeks, if he's healthy and looks like the player he was last year.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate you stopping by today. We're talking some Indiana Hoosier football, and we'll get you back another time here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
Sounds good, Shannon. We'll see you down the line.
All right, partner. Appreciate you. Mike Nizolek from the Herald-Times. They're in Bloomington talking Indiana Hoosier football. We're going to step aside here, and on the other side, we hope to have Mitt Winter, sports attorney, to fill us a little in on the scenario with Lewis Moore and kind of all that chaos that is created here in the last week. We'll do that right after we get back here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
The ISC Sports Network is your home for sports content across the Hoosier State. Find us live on TV and streaming or archived on our website and our app. The ISC is your one-stop shop for the content you want to see, including high school sports, college sports, and other great events throughout the year. Subscribe to our streaming service and get access to it all. ISC, local lives here.
Know a team or group needing a fundraiser? Boost Fundraising raises more money faster and offers the most unique and user-friendly online fundraiser in the nation. Your team receives personalized fundraising pages for each team member. Free team-branded promo gifts shipped to each donor. Boost Fundraising does it all. Sports teams, marching bands, charity causes, and community groups. Go to boostfundraising.com and be sure to enter the promo code COYLE, that's COYLE, to receive a discounted fundraiser. If you're looking for a new home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore from Brick and Ivy Realty. Cheryl Sizemore has over 2 decades of experience, and that could be the difference in getting the home you want in today's tough housing market. Reach out to Cheryl at CherylSizemore@gmail.com or 317-701-0838. That's 317-701-0838. Let Cheryl Sizemore sell or find your new home today. When it comes to apparel and promotions, Freethink has you covered, literally, whether it's 24 or 200 shirts for sports leagues, businesses, or groups. Freethink Apparel and Promotions can also create your very own merchandising store. Freethink Apparel and Promotions did it for Indiana Sports Beat Radio, and they can do it for you. Whether it's screen printing, embroidery, digital printing, promotional products, vehicle wraps, or anything else under the promotional line. See what Freethink Apparel and Promotions can do for you at freethinkapparel.com.
Welcome back to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. I'm the Coach Shannon Griffith alongside Jim Coyle, who's with us. You look like a linebacker.
Got my airplane sleep pillow on, baby.
All ready to go.
It worked on the way down. It didn't work, or it worked on the way back. It didn't work on the way down. No sleep, but on the way back. Boy, after we cleared the ground, I didn't know anything until we landed back on the ground.
Yeah, that's the beauty when you can do that on a flight, especially long flights. like 3.5-hour flights or, in that category. But glad it was a safe trip back. No problems. Everything went well. And we're going to bring in right now Mitt Winter, a sports attorney and I believe a former William and Mary basketball player, if I'm not mistaken. Mitt, appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you are correct. I did play basketball at William and Mary, but it's been a few years since I did that.
Well, yeah, we've all had a few years on us, that's for sure, in any of the competition. And but we appreciate you coming in, and we got some, need for your knowledge, I guess you could say. And I think I did send you over the Lewis Moore scenario that is just became an issue here over this last week for the Indiana Hoosiers. Safety who was at Indiana for a couple seasons, transferred to Ole Miss, and then came back via the portal this year. Now, it just came out this week that the NCAA had denied his appeal of getting this extra year of eligibility to play. And I think everybody looks at that situation and says, what's the difference from the Pavia kid down at Vanderbilt? And I think everybody assumed, including some of the Indiana folks, assumed that once that ruling was made, it was kind of like a blanket ruling for guys that were JUCO players that they were going to get this year back. So kind of give us your insight on that, and then we can pick around and ask more afterwards.
Yeah. You're right. A lot of college athletes in a similar situation as Lewis Moore thought after the Pavia case that, all right, I'm in the same situation as Diego Pavia. I played junior college, and the NCAA said at least one of your years of junior college isn't going to count towards your 4 seasons of Division I competition that everyone gets. But the thing that a lot of people might not have caught in the blanket waiver the NCAA issued after the Pavia case is the NCAA did not waive what's known as your 5-year eligibility window. So everybody has 4 seasons of Division I competition that they can use, but they have to be used within a 5-year time period that starts from when you started playing college athletics, including junior college. So Lewis Moore, from what I understand, his clock started in 2019, which is when he first enrolled at a junior college. So he has, under the Pavia waiver, 1 more season at least of Division I competition to play. But since he's outside of that 5-year eligibility window, he cannot use that season he still has left unless he gets a waiver from the NCAA of the 5-year eligibility window, or he gets a court to say that 5-year eligibility window rule violates antitrust law. And there have been a couple of athletes in similar situations that have got a federal court to say, yes, the NCAA's 5-year eligibility window, we think probably violates antitrust law. So at least with respect to that specific athlete, the courts have enjoined enforcement of that rule, allowing the athlete to play. There's been an athlete, a football player at Rutgers, who was successful in that argument. Recently, there was a football player at Nevada who was successful in that. So we'll have to see what happens here. Moore filed his case in a state court in Texas. Most of these cases have been filed in federal court, and their decisions have kind of been all over the place, to be honest. There have been some that have turned out well, like Pavia and Jed Elad, I mentioned, and a guy named the Braham case in Nevada. But then there have been others where a court says, no, we don't think this 5-year eligibility window rule violates antitrust law. So sorry, college athlete, you're out of luck. You're done. You can't play.
Hey, Mitt, how are you, brother? Thank you again for coming on. We appreciate you very much, as always. That reminded me when you said he filed that in Texas. So I wonder if that's kind of a fallback plan to file it there first, and if there is a failure or something, that you can still go via the federal route, although you're eating up time as you do that.
Now, I'm not actually sure why they decided to file it in state court versus federal court, but if he loses in state court, he's not going to then be able to go and get another bite at the apple in federal court. Him and his attorneys must have thought there was some advantage to filing it in this Dallas state court. And I don't know what their reasoning there was because, like I said, most of these, almost all, I think, have been filed in federal court previously, but they must have had some reason that they thought filing it in this Texas state court would be advantageous, but I can't tell you what their reasoning there was.
Is it because, let me ask you this, and you may have answered this, so apologize if so. When these federal courts make a ruling, is it a ruling just for that particular individual, or is it a ruling that encompasses everyone else that is in a similar or kind of similar situation like Lewis Moore?
Yeah, so with all of these eligibility rules cases, they've just been specific to that athlete that brought the lawsuit. So, for example, the Pavia case, he won. That injunction that he was granted that prevented the NCAA from enforcing its eligibility rules only applied to Diego Pavia. But in that instance, the NCAA went ahead and said, all right, because Diego Pavia won, we want to try and treat all athletes the same. We're going to issue this blanket waiver that says if the 2024 football season would have been your last season under the our current rules, we're going to go ahead and give you a waiver if you played 1 year of junior college and give you an extra year. But they haven't done that, granted a blanket waiver for the 5-year eligibility window situation, even though there now have been 2 athletes that have won in those cases. They haven't, after those athletes won, said, okay, we're going to also issue a blanket waiver for the 5-year window rule. They've made every athlete either try and seek a waiver at the NCAA, and I don't think anyone's gotten a waiver from the NCAA, or then just go ahead and file a lawsuit. So that's why now there are, I think, 33 lawsuits that have been filed against the NCAA related to their eligibility rules. I can't tell you the exact number related to the 5-year eligibility window, but a lot of those 33 is related to that issue because you do have a lot of athletes in the same situation as Lewis Moore. They have an extra season they can use, but they can't use it because they're outside that 5-year window.
Would it be better for the NCAA to, I don't want to say concede, but say, hey, we've got to come to, a point here and find some common ground so we can have a rule where we're not getting called into court so much, because this has been a constant barrage in the last 4 years where it's just, hey, if you don't get the ruling you want from the NCAA, sue them. You're going to win. And so I'm thinking that they would want to get past all this.
Yeah, I tend to agree. For whatever reason, though, I think after the Pavia blanket waiver, they've made a decision, all right, we're not going to issue any more blanket waivers. We're going to make people go out and fight this in court. I think they've gotten to the point where they probably have decided, all right, we need to actually try and enforce these eligibility rules. And they have appealed the Pavia case to a federal appellate court, and the other 2 cases I mentioned, the Jet Elad one and the Braham ones, they've appealed all of those up to appellate courts. So I think their hope is these appellate courts will say, trial courts, you were wrong. These eligibility rules don't violate antitrust law. And then they can just go ahead and say, all right, we're going to enforce these rules now as we have in the past.
Well, knowing what you do, which I know is little on this particular issue because you're not representing it, but what is your gut feeling saying on these types of cases? Because I also think back to where there have been players that played 6 and up to 7 or had 6 to 7 years to actually complete their eligibility for various things that the NCAA has allowed. That's another thing I keep looking at. It's like, man, how long can the NCAA pick and choose what they're going to allow it for and just say, all right, we've got to come to some kind of consensus, because they generally seem to lose in court.
Yeah, and that's what makes it hard to defend these rules sometimes, because there are so many exceptions. And one thing that's been talked about is just giving every, at least at the Division I level, every athlete gets 5 years to play in a 5-year window. And they're going to try and get rid of all the different waivers and exceptions. Because, right now, if you're a football player, you can play 4 games and it doesn't count as one of your seasons. So you can play 4 games and then play 4 more years, 4 more seasons. In other sports, you can't do that. And so with all these different exceptions, kind of as you mentioned, it does get hard to defend the eligibility rules. So I think at some point they'll probably get to that 5-5 rule. But again, 5 is still potentially an arbitrary number. It does kind of align with like where your typical college student is probably now in school for 5 years. So you could say it kind of aligns with that. But when you're talking about college athletes now making hundreds and thousands, millions of dollars per year playing their sport, that someone's probably going to challenge that as well at some point. So I think for rules like this to really have legal stability and certainty, there's 2 ways to do it. One, either Congress passes a federal law that gives the NCAA an antitrust exemption, so they won't be sued all the time for these eligibility rules, or they get to a model where the rules are agreed upon with the athletes, like you see in pro sports, NFL, NBA, where rules around salary cap and draft and stuff like that are agreed to with the Players Association, which makes them exempt from antitrust law. So I think one of those 2 things is going to happen at some point.
Yeah, what is your firm type of handling now, or do you all get involved in any of these types of cases?
I did work on one of these eligibility cases for a baseball player at Kansas State University, which isn't too far from where I am in Kansas City. That case, it didn't end up going too far. There were some other very similar cases that didn't go in the athlete's favor. So the decision was just made to drop that case because you could kind of see the writing on the wall. What was going to happen with that one. So I have worked on at least one of these, so I'm pretty familiar with all the issues.
I'm sorry, Coach, go ahead.
No, that's good. What you made a comment there that the NCAA has filed for an appeal up the chain to get relief on this. And basically what Pavia and these people are getting is just an injunction. And it's not actually saying a ruling per se. It's just delaying their case until it can be heard. But my question is now, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong. The NCAA had initially said a while ago, if you play a player, even though it's tied up in court, and it comes to find out that the NCAA wins that case, they are going to go back and apply the ruling, and you're going to forfeit all those games. Is that something that could happen in this situation? Because that has some bearing on this as well, especially now with the playoffs and things of that matter.
Yeah, so what you're referring to is known as the rule of restitution, and it is basically what you just described. If a court enters a preliminary injunction that allows an athlete to play, but then it gets overturned later, the NCAA's rule of restitution says we can go back and retroactively say this athlete was ineligible, even though at the time he played, a court said we couldn't enforce the relevant rule. But in these cases, like the Pavia case and the other 2 cases I mentioned where athletes have gotten preliminary injunctions entered, the courts have also enjoined the rule of restitution. So it's not going to be an issue with the athlete playing and then the NCAA going back and saying, oh, actually, he wasn't ineligible because we wanted the appellate level, so you have to forfeit all of your games.
Okay. Because that would be a situation of, now you're in a catch-22
right,
as a coach, because if you have a team that is potentially a college football playoff team and you come to find out that they're going to go back on it, it makes the decision to play somebody even more so of a riskier proposition in that case. So this whole thing, you had mentioned, what it's going to take to kind of get by some of these things with antitrust, either a law passed by Congress or a potential collective bargaining situation. On the collective bargaining side, if that were to come to fruition where you had a union for the players, are we creeping into an area of employment now for said universities and colleges throughout the country that if there is a collective bargaining union for the players, now do they all of a sudden become employees of the said institution?
Yeah, under the current state of the law, to actually have true collective bargaining, the athletes would need to be employees. And they wouldn't necessarily have to be employees of the universities. They could be employees of some new private entity that a university forms to operate its college football team or basketball team or all of its athletic programs. And I don't know if you guys have paid attention to what Tennessee's AD has kind of proposed on his model of collective bargaining. He's proposed a model where the athletes would not be employees of the universities, but this other third party private entity, which eliminates some of the issues around different state laws on who's allowed to unionize if you're a public employee and who's not. So that would probably be the model that happens. But there's also been some talk about, and again, this would also take a federal law, so who knows if it would ever happen, but a model that would allow college athletes to effectively collectively bargain without being employees. So that's an option as well. But like I said, under the current state of the law, to actually engage in collective bargaining, they would have to be employees.
And that is what I was going to say there as well. That's where Kentucky has basically formed a LLC, and they're no longer considered a part of the University of Kentucky, but they are the Kentucky Bluegrass something LLC. Is that kind of what you're referencing, that they, like a school like Indiana would have to become an LLC outside of the scope of the institution?
Yep, that's one example. Yep, Champions Blue LLC is what Kentucky has. It's a nonprofit LLC that they formed, and now they put all their athletics department over into that. That's an option. Schools could do that. Or there could be one private entity that employs all of the Power 4 football players, for example. That's another potential model.
Would there still be the possibilities for, possibilities probably not the right word, but opportunities for lawsuits by players, even against that third party, if they, for whatever reason, there was a disagreement about something, and then now you're just opening up a different kettle of fish?
Yeah, so if we do have collective bargaining where the athletes who are employed by this LLC collectively bargain with, their conferences, or if there's some new entity that's formed to operate college football, it could even be the college football playoff. That's a separate private entity that already exists. So if they engage in true collective bargaining and agree on these rules, they're exempt from antitrust law. So you would not, as an athlete, be able to bring the types of antitrust lawsuits that you're seeing right now. You just would lose.
Well, man, we really, really appreciate you as always. You are the guy, the guru when it comes to knowing the legalities of these sports issues that have become a unfortunate daily part of our sports lives now. But we appreciate you and hope to continue. I see you doing things all over the place, man. So you have become the guy to go to.
Thanks, appreciate it, and yeah, happy to come on. Again, like you said, there will probably be seeing lots more legal issues continuing on in college athletics, at least for a while.
Well, we appreciate you, brother. You have a great rest of your week.
You too, and safe travels back home.
Thank you, brother. Mitt Winter joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Jim Coyle with Coach. We're back with more. No, this is it. Or we do need to take a quick break. Got to take a quick break, right?
Yeah, we can get
or is
one
it time to cut? I can't see the time.
Yeah,
so
well, I was going to cut it because we're right up against the 10:38 mark, and so you need to get in the car. You need to get in the car and drive still, and we'll let you get out of here for that as well and finish off our Tuesday, buddy.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks to all of those that joined us here today, Mike DeCourcy, Mike Nizolek, and of course, Mitt Winter. But most of all, thank to you, the listeners. But we'll be back tomorrow right here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. We'll see you on the radio.
There you go.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.